Without further ado, because you didn't come here to see me, even though I could talk all night long. My father-in-law is over here too, he knows that. But I'd like to introduce our speaker. Bob Wall is Vice President of Smart Power, the nation's leading marketing firm focused on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Previously, he worked for nonprofits and quasi-governmental organizations where he managed nationally recognized community-based clean energy programs. In addition, Bob is the chair of Sustainable Fairfield and received a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2011 from People's Action for Clean Energy and the President's Volunteer Service Award in 2024. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Wesleyan University, right here in Connecticut, and a Juris Doctor degree from Fordham University School of Law, not here in Connecticut. But without further ado, Bob, thanks for joining us and welcome.
And let's have another big round of applause for the incredible IT team that got this up and running. I was sweating bullets for a while, but thank you all for coming out on this winter's evening. You heard a little bit about Smart Power, and I had a fond flashback as I was driving here to the library because I was in Simsbury before the Board of Selectmen, probably close to 20 years ago, trying to get the town to join the Clean Energy Communities program. And that was one of the programs that Smart Power managed. Another one was Solarize CT, which Mark reminded me the town did back in 2014. And I don't think you are involved with the other one, but we did the Neighbor to Neighbor Energy Challenge with a number of Connecticut towns. So Simsbury is fortunate to have been chosen for the PowerSmart program, which is a community-based 20-week campaign. It's modeled upon Solarize, except in this program, we're going to be promoting residential battery storage in addition to solar. The program is made possible by funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, when there was funding for programs like this. And our team is led by academic partners at Yale and NYU, who will be conducting a study when we finish this round of campaigns. Basically, they're trying to figure out the co-adoption tendencies between solar and other advanced technologies. Our program is limited to battery storage systems, but they're also looking into the relationship between solar and electric vehicles, as well as energy efficiency. So I'm going to do a few slides on solar. You obviously have had this program, and I know how many people here do have solar already? Well, it's a good percentage, but not everybody does. So this program, as I said, is for people both who have solar as well as those who don't, and anyone who's considering adding a battery storage system. So the old solar program was created by my former employer, the Connecticut Green Bank, and they did such a great job. They met the legislative targets, and their program was sunsetted at the end of 2021, and it's transitioned over to a new program called Residential Renewable Energy Solutions, which is administered by Eversource in this territory as well as UI. And a couple of key differences. The new program does not offer upfront incentives for solar, and they've also changed the way net metering is credited to the customer, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the amazing thing is there are over 50,000 residential solar systems in Connecticut, so a lot of people don't think solar works well here. It actually works very well, and the payback is even better because of those awful high rates we pay. The higher the rates, the quicker the payback for solar. So the benefits are many, and I just highlighted a few of them, but cost savings. When you get solar, you're essentially putting a cap on your electric bill for the lifetime of your system. So you'll be paying less whether you purchase it or lease it, and you can protect against future rate increases. It also, according to many studies, has shown that it increases the value of your home. If you have two houses that are identical, except one has solar side by side, the house with solar is worth more because they're not going to be paying electric bills for the most part in that house. And then also the environmental benefits of going solar. You're displacing the fossil fuel emissions from conventional power plants, as well as water consumption, something that's not really that well publicized. Is your house right for solar? There are a few main factors. Number one is the orientation. So they want to find out, if you're getting sun, so you could be facing south, east, or west, or any combination of those, and you should be suitable for solar. Unfortunately, my house is facing north, so even though I've been evangelizing about this for 20 years, I still don't have solar on my house. I also have a number of tall trees around me, which is point two. You want to be relatively shade-free, whether it's trees or chimneys, dormers, anything else that casts shadows on your roof will impair the solar productivity of a system. And last but not least, the age of your roof, you want it to be relatively young in its lifespan for the simple reason that you don't want to have to take the solar system off to replace your shingles. So if it's under 10 years, then you can talk to the contractor to get a sense of what they recommend. If it's under 10 years, you should be okay on that. I mentioned that the net metering paradigm has changed. The new system gives two different options. One is called buy all, and under this choice, you buy all your electricity from the grid and you sell all the electricity from your system back to the grid at an agreed price. There are special incentives for low-income families, but your contractor can explain that. If you're considering getting a battery storage system, you want what's behind door number 2, which is called netting. And this is fairly similar to the original net metering, except in this situation, you're getting a dollar credit rather than a kilowatt hour credit. The old system, you would compare the kilowatt hours produced versus what you drew from the grid and you paid the difference. Now you're just getting paid a value in dollar amounts for what you produce, and it's reflected on your bill. So again, if you're considering batteries, you want option 2, the netting option. Just tried to highlight, this is always changing, but according to recent sources, we've checked multiple sites online, the average cost of solar in Connecticut is between $275 and $320 per watt. If you talk to a contractor, they're going to be selling systems in denominations of kilowatts, so you simply multiply by 1,000 times this price. So you could pay more, you could pay less. There's some high-end products that cost a little bit more, but produce a little bit more. So the graph here, I don't know if you can see this, but we will be providing this to the town, so nobody has to take notes. There's going to be a lot of links, and save your carpal tunnel syndrome. Don't have to copy it down. But this just shows, I would say in Connecticut now, the average size system is creeping up close to 10 kilowatts. When I was at the Green Bank a few years back, it was more like 7.5. But for a 10 kilowatt system, the original cost would be just under $30,000. And as bullet 2 indicates, there is now a 30% federal tax credit. So you would take 30% off the base cost of the system, and that's in the second column. So that 10 kilowatt system would shrink from 29.7 down to 20,008 roughly. So it's a generous incentive, but as I said, there are no more upfront incentives. Those have been retired. And we already talked about the net metering options, but that gives you value for your production and credit for that. So now I'm going to move on to the battery portion, which is really what this program is all about. And battery storage systems seem like something new, probably for the reason that unlike solar systems, which are on your neighbor's roof or on school roofs, you can't see them. They're usually in a garage or a basement. But if you think about it, batteries are ubiquitous in our everyday lives. Your toothbrush when you wake up, your cell phones, your laptops. Some of you drive electric cars or mow your lawns with electric mowers. We use batteries routinely, and this is just taking the same technology and allowing you to store power from a solar system, or you can even do it without a solar system, but use it to power certain things at your house just as you would with a conventional generator. So the benefits, again, there are many. It's a backup power source when the grid goes down. When I moved back to Connecticut about 25 years ago, we almost never had blackouts, and since then we have a lot of blackouts. So this is an opportunity to get not only backup power, but clean backup power if it's being powered from your solar system. And also you can use the clean energy that's stored from your system after the sun goes down. So even at night, your solar system can help run things in your house. Under the new program that we're going to talk about a lot, called Energy Storage Solutions, you can earn money. Eversource is actually willing to pay you for the power from your battery storage system. And in doing so, it helps the utilities to avoid having to go out and purchase power on those hottest days of the year. They always talk about the 10 hottest days. I think, unfortunately, there's more like 15, 20, and it's getting more and more. And even some of the coldest days, when they have to go out, they have to turn on so-called peaker plants. And not only is that power among the dirtiest that's used by the grid, but it's also the most expensive. So you're doing your neighbors a favor by helping lower the cost for everybody. And if you have a critical medical device, it helps to keep that running along with the other amenities in your house. So I did a table here to explain you kind of have two options. One is you can buy the battery storage system outright and you don't have to enroll in the program. The other is Energy Storage Solutions. Just to confuse things a little, there used to be a third option called Connected Solutions, and if anyone got a battery system years ago, they probably went through that program, which has now been retired here in Connecticut. But if you want to buy the system outright, you're free to work with any contractor as long as they're properly licensed. You can choose any battery equipment. However, there's no upfront incentive from the state, and there's no performance incentive. You are, however, entitled to the 30% tax credit. If you enroll in the Energy Storage Solutions program, you are required to use both an eligible contractor and eligible equipment. These are both open enrollment programs. So currently, I think there are between 40 and 50 contractors who do residential properties. And the list of eligible equipment is growing. When we started this program, there were only 3 manufacturers who were approved. Now it's closer to 13 or 15. It changes all the time. They're always bringing new ones on board. And the reason for that is just to make sure that in order to interface with the grid, which is what earns you the performance incentive payback, they have to make sure that the setup is done properly. And so there are a lot of companies and a lot of equipment that have qualified. And as I said, it's an open program. So if you know of somebody who is not an eligible contractor or a piece of equipment that's not on the list, you can have them talk to the Green Bank, and it's a simple system if they want to get approved. So if you do enroll in Energy Storage Solutions, you're eligible to get an upfront incentive as well as a performance incentive, which we'll go into in excruciating detail, as well as the 30% tax credit. So I'm going to walk through that because it's a little complicated, but it all helps to lower the cost of the system, which admittedly is, upfront, it is fairly expensive, but after application of all these incentives and the tax credit, the intent was to make it somewhat comparable with conventional generators. So here is a table illustrating the incentive rates for the upfront incentive. For most customers, the baseline is $250 per kilowatt hour. And There are higher incentives for low-income households, as well as households that are on the so-called grid edge, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Then there's that 30% federal tax credit, and then the performance incentive. So for the upfront incentive, as I said, you have to enroll in the Energy Storage Solutions program. This was created about 3 years ago. It's run jointly by the Connecticut Green Bank, Eversource, and UI. And in doing so, you're agreeing to automatically store power, probably from your solar system, but it could be from, without a solar system, and then discharge it back to the grid during specified periods. That's called a passive dispatch. This incentive is paid by the Green Bank to the contractor, so it essentially lowers the price from here to here when you get the bill. And it's determined by the battery energy capacity. So it's a little confusing because batteries are denominated both in kilowatts and kilowatt hours. So one refers to power, the other refers to capacity. So the incentive, the only caveats are it can't exceed more than 50% of the total cost of the system, nor can it exceed a maximum of $16,000. But that's a pretty generous incentive. So I already talked about the different, if you're grid edge, you get a 50% adder. So why don't we just go, well, we'll talk about the passive dispatch first. Again, this is mandatory in order to get that upfront incentive. And you're asked to discharge 80% of the battery automatically. You don't have to do anything. The contractor will set your system, and it just happens. You don't have to flip any switches or anything. And this happens on weekdays in the summer months, June, July, August, approximately 60 days overall. The only exceptions are on a holiday, and in the summer, really, we're talking about 4th of July. Or if what's known as an active dispatch, those are on those critical 10 days or more than 10 days, that will override the passive dispatch. And interestingly, you have an option whether you want to participate or not. It seems counterintuitive that on the days most urgent, that you have a choice not to sell your power back. But also, if there is a storm predicted, a serious storm that could cause some outage, within 2 days, they will not draw from your battery in case you need the power to run your house. And typically these will run, the passive dispatch runs for 3 hours from 5 to 8. This was changed recently by the PURA. It was 5 hours, but they found that they could achieve the same ends, but just by shrinking it to 3 hours. So I talked about grid edge, and these are the electrical circuits. Nobody has any idea what circuit they're on, but there are a bunch of circuits out there. And if your circuit was in the top 10% for the most outages or the longest outages over the past decade or so, you are considered grid edge. And this entitles you to a 50% adder. So instead of 250 per kilowatt hour, you're up to 375 per kilowatt hour. So I tried to do a screenshot of Simsbury, and you'll see sort of in the southwest corner, there are a lot of, if you could see it, trust me, there are a lot of blue and red lines there. But the simplest way of determining whether you're on that grid edge, there's a link here, and you can enter your address, and it will tell you if you are on the grid edge. And again, that entitles you to a 50% adder for that upfront incentive. So if you're in those other parts of Simsbury, unfortunately, you're not considered grid edge, and you would just get the standard rate for that. But the same thing applies if you qualify for low income, and this applies for retirees as well. So I have friends in Fairfield that qualified as low income, even though they live in what I consider to be a mansion, and they got heat pumps at their house, and they qualified as low income for that. So it's worth looking into if you're retired, and if you're retired plus grid edge, then you get the 50% on top of that. Although you're probably going to run into the cap of 16,000 because they increase the incentives for low income so much that it probably pushes you over the maximum incentive, and you would get the maximum, but you don't get more than that. And as I said, low income by definition is less than 60% of the state median income. So if you're retired, you don't have income that is factored in here. And you would work with your contractor to fill out an eligibility form and an affidavit for that. And it depends on family size, so it's scalable depending on how many people live under your roof. So we talked about the federal tax credit. This is 30%, same as the solar, and it applies to the net cost. So if you do get the upfront incentive, you have to deduct that from the price, and then you take 30% off that net cost. You don't get a check in the mail for this. It's in the form of a tax credit. So the year that your system is installed, when you're filing your tax return, you're allowed to take dollar for dollar the credit. And if your tax liability is greater than the credit, then you get 100% of that amount, the 30%. If it's the opposite, if the tax credit is greater than your liability, you can roll it over up until 2032, I believe. So every year you can apply it. So it's a great incentive that will help lower the cost. And the last kind of incentive is that performance incentive, and this is for what we refer to as the active dispatch. As I said, these are optional, but if you opt out of the active dispatch, it's going to lower the amount of your incentive, and the more you do it, the more you will get. And this has 2 seasons, both the summer, and the summer extends from June to the end of September, so it's a month longer than that passive dispatch season, but also in the winter from November to March. They tell you the number of events. It could be as few as 30 during the summer, up to 60, or in the winter between 1 to 5. And they have hours there for that. And they provide amounts. So these are paid back seasonally. You would get 2 checks a year after the summer season and after the winter season. For the first 5 years, it's fixed at 200 for the summer and 25 per kilowatt. These are in kilowatt denominations. And then starting in year 6, for the next 5 years, it drops down slightly to 115 and 15. I'll give an example later on so you could see what that translates to. Important question is, what size battery do you need for your house? This is where you need to work with a contractor. They're going to ask you, what do you want to be able to run? And really, you don't want to say everything, because then you'll be spending too much to get more batteries than you need. You really want to pare it down to what's essential. And for most houses, you want to be able to run your lights. You want the refrigerator to stay on so the food doesn't spoil. You want your outlets so you can charge devices and do other things. A sump pump or a water pump or a medical device. So you would talk to them and they can calculate. They have tools that they can estimate how much electricity each item would use, and then they could give you the recommendation as to the appropriate size. And you also want to consider how long you want the backup power to run. The beauty of solar is that it can recharge as long as the sun is shining, and typically after there's a storm, it seems like the next day it's a beautiful day out there. So the solar can recharge day after day, but in the event it doesn't do that, you want to consider if you want like 2 days or 3 days. So again, it's a conversation you would have with the contractor, and they could help you to determine what size is appropriate for you. So this is a picture. We did an event in Mansfield last year, just to give you an idea of like where does the battery go. In this case, it's in the owner's garage, and you could see him standing in front of it. And just to give you a ballpark estimate, it's roughly the height and width of a refrigerator, but it's much shallower. So these can go on the wall, and they're not going to take away space for your car or your tools or other things. We did 2 tours in Mansfield, and the second one, I don't know if any of you know Lynn Stoddard, who used to run the Sustainable CT program, but her battery is in the basement of the house. So garage and basement are the typical locations. The battery you choose, it's possible it could be outdoors, but most of the time they're indoors. The state of Connecticut adopted a new building code that requires a barrier between the battery and the house of non-combustible material. If it's in the garage that has, concrete walls, that's fine, but you might need to have them put in a little barrier, and it should be well ventilated because it does generate some heat, not tremendous amount. So unfortunately, this is a screenshot, but it's very faint, and you'll probably have to look at this when we leave it behind. But this is the list of the eligible equipment. It's grown from 3 to, I don't know how many are there, but even within the manufacturers, some of them have multiple models, up to 5 models. And one of the interesting developments is that when the old Connected Solutions program was retired, they approved some new companies, including Tesla, but Tesla, not surprisingly, has decided not to play ball like all the other manufacturers, and so they are not eligible for the upfront incentive. They are eligible for the performance incentive, but they take a 20% cut of that. As far as I know, they're the only ones that do that. But it's a big and growing list, so there are a lot of options. But you should know that, depending on which contractor you're working with, they might only do 1 or 2 or maybe 3 models. So it's not like going into Home Depot and you can pick all 13. So you'll probably have to talk to different contractors, which we recommend anyway, to figure out which ones offer the system of your choice. So how do you find contractors? Well, on the Energy Storage Solutions site, there is that list that I referred to. It has some filter techniques on it, so you can filter just for residential. I neglected to mention that both of these programs, both the solar and the battery storage, are available for commercial customers, including a town. That's not the focus of our program, and there's slightly different players involved and different amounts for the incentives. But if you own a business or are part of an organization or the town that's interested in solar or batteries, there are programs and incentives available for them as well. So if you go to the Energy Storage Solutions site, you can look on there. And the list of the eligible contractors, I said it's between 40 and 50 last time I counted for residential. It's basically a who's who of the contractors in Connecticut. So the contractors have changed probably from 2014. There's some names that are not around, some have been acquired, some have changed names, but it's a pretty robust list. And also on the site, Energy Storage Solutions, the Green Bank has a ton of reports on there, so you can figure out which companies have done the most jobs, if that provides some comfort knowing that contractor A has done 75 systems and contractor B has done 10. It gives you an idea of relative experience. But don't forget, some of those guys might have done jobs under the old Connected Solutions or outside of Connecticut, then their numbers are not reflected on these reports. But it's a good place to start. I'm going to talk about the website. Unfortunately, we had a potential cyber attack over the weekend, so we had to take, or we didn't, but the IT guys took the system down. It should be back up soon, but you can go there and type in your address and it'll come through to us, and we'll try to provide some guidance and technical support to help you on the process. There's also a platform called Energy Sage. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. It's a platform that was created, again, through funding from the DOE to help people really to get started. And they have participating partners there, so it's not every player, but you can get multiple quotes and at least get started. And we always recommend, just like any other home improvement project, that you do get more than one quote, and also ask for references. So that will get you on your way. I know there's at least one gentleman here in Simsbury who's in this room tonight who has a battery storage system. But if you know anybody with solar or storage, you can ask them who they use, what their experience was like. Also on that Greenbank site, there's a map, and it has like pins everywhere. There's an approved system, and I think when I checked, there were at least 3 in Simsbury. They don't give you the names or the addresses, but they do give you the coordinates. So if you could somehow interface it with GIS, you can figure out who's got a battery system. But again, talk to people who've been through the process, and usually they're very happy, and they're pleased to share their lessons they learned. So this is the example that I created to kind of tie it all together with the incentives. And this is not a typical system. It's the actual average system that I found from the Greenbank earlier this month. So that resulted in a 10.6 kilowatt and a 23 kilowatt hour hypothetical system. There probably is nothing that has those numbers. This is just the average. And the average cost was just under $30,000 to start. So the first line illustrates the upfront incentive. The standard incentive would be, for this system, $57.50, and then it would go up as you move right if you're on the grid edge, or if you qualify for low income or low income grid edge. And you can see some of these are getting up to the cap levels. And then, again, the method is whatever the rate for your customer class is, you multiply it by the kilowatt hour. So the second number there, in this case the 23, is what you multiply it, and that is the upfront incentive, again, paid directly to the contractor. Then you have to subtract that from the original cost and calculate the 30% tax credit. It's pretty straightforward. It's whatever the net cost times 30%. And then lastly, we did a performance-based incentive. There is a calculator on the Greenbank website, and I'll have a link here to leave behind. You can actually plug in the numbers of the system that you're contemplating, and it will give you a fairly accurate estimate of what all the different incentives and what the bottom lines will be. But in this average example, the standard net costs after 10 years would be about $8,000, and it would reduce, it would be about $6,000 if you're on grid edge. If you qualify for the low income, it's between $2,300 down to $1,600 if you're low income grid edge. So again, you can calculate it with real numbers based on a real system that you're looking at, and the contractor can help you with this and many other questions you might have. So how to pay for this? This is not inexpensive. For some people, they may want to pay cash, and typically, at least with solar, you get the best return on investment from buying with cash, but a similar return for loan, although you are paying interest on that. But in both of those cases, you own the system, you get the incentive, and you get the tax credit. There's a Smart E-loan offered by the Greenbank, and there's other lenders such as home equity loans that can help in that regard. The other option is a lease or a power purchase agreement. You might be familiar with this from the solar side. In this scenario, a third party owns your system, and they are the entity that gets the incentive and the tax credit. But hopefully they pass that on to the customer. They build that into the contract price that they offer over a period. I think they're doing 25 years now is more the standard. It used to be 20. But these are a couple examples of contractors who routinely do third-party projects: Trinity, Posigen, Sunrun. Here's a website that goes into greater detail on best ways to pay for solar. And these are some of the banks that offer the Smarty loans. And there are more, but I think these are the ones for your area. I'm not 100% sure about Eastern, but I think Ion and Nutmeg State are definitely serve Simsbury. So they offer, all offer up to 50,000, which is more than enough to cover this. Different terms at different years. And I mentioned that the campaign website is temporarily offline, but you can go there, get a lot of information about the technologies and the program. Again, you can enter your address and it will come through to us, and we'll get back to you to help answer questions you might have and point you in the right direction. And you're also free to call the administrators of these programs. I'll have links coming up here. But the website eventually, now that the campaign is officially kicking off, we'll be building this up to include testimonials, media about the program, and other resources to help you in the process. So these are links for solar. Again, don't bother writing them down. We'll give this to Mark and the town, and you'll have it. I'll try to post it on the website, which will hopefully be back up soon. But it has tons of frequently asked questions. Here's an email at the bottom of the person at Eversource you can write to with questions about the solar program. And similarly for the battery program, this is the Energy Storage Solutions. Lots of information out there, frequently asked questions. The program highlights are those reports that I talked, the performance reports are linked here, and that incentive calculator that you can, it's interactive, you can use it to determine the amount is there, and a contact for representative at the Green Bank to help answer any questions from their end. But you can certainly contact Smart Power, and I'd be happy to answer questions if it's beyond my pay level, such as setting up this PowerPoint. We'll help you to find somebody who can get that guy, or where's that guy? He's not there anymore. Anyway, I'll stop now and take questions from the audience.
I looked at solar about 10 years ago, and one of the issues was that no matter what I did in my house, I still had to pay Eversource every month for their whatever they needed. So if I do all this stuff again, how does Eversource get paid? They're going to hit some schmuck in Hartford who's in a rental, paying for my freedom.
Well,
how do you justify?
It's sort of a complicated answer, but
Well, it's a complicated question.
at root, it depends on what your system size is and how much electricity you use. You'll always have the monthly price, but for people who size their system to address 100% of their needs, and now you can even go over 100% because they anticipate people will be adding electric vehicles or heat pumps, so they allow you to go slightly above 100%. But at any rate, the net metering is where there's some compensation issues, and it depends if you choose the buy all versus netting. And again, these are questions for the contractor. But in theory, you should be able to get, if the system is sized for 100%, it should take care of most of your bill. You may have excess in the summer and not enough in the winter, but it should balance out over the course of 12 months.
I think it was also talking about like that somebody else's bill might go up. Is that one of your concerns?
Well, yeah, because Eversource has to get paid. They have to pay for their infrastructure somehow. Somebody's going to pay for that.
So I think the efficiency over the grid, you alluded to that too by not having to tap into more efficient things.
Well, you're actually helping the grid, right? Because you're creating power that either you'll be using or you'll be turning over to the grid. So they benefit that way. So no one's going to have to be picking up for you. But the way some of this is paid for is through the public benefits charge on the bill, because society benefits from having more clean energy, because with that there's less pollution and public health improves.
I agree with that part, but I don't think the numbers match up, because somebody pays somewhere for the infrastructure that's already there. Somebody has to pay
That's
for
built
that.
into the rate case, and the percentage of the rate case, the two people who do residential solar is minuscule. So your impact on the overall rate case mostly on the large infrastructure that they have to put in place, not on the differential that they're having to net meter out for residential customers versus charge them for their electricity. That actually costs them less to do that than it does to do things like pay for people electricity by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, they benefit.
It might be a good marketing thing for them, but it's not new.
Don't forget, there's like 3.5 million people in Connecticut, so probably over 1 million houses, and only 50,000 have solar. So there's plenty of regular customers that are paying for it, but you're helping the system by producing power that they don't have to produce. So they're saving money. So it washes out. I don't think anyone's going to be picking up the tab for people who go solar. Yes, ma'am.
A few questions on battery. Thank you. I wonder, I have three, I guess, questions. One is, what is the useful life now for battery storage systems? What are the warranty periods? And how long can you load shift, in terms of the saving of energy?
Well, in order to participate in the program, you have to guarantee a minimum 10-year warranty. But my understanding is the lifespan of a typical battery is 10 to 15 years. So they don't last as long as solar systems, but they do produce and can store and discharge power for that entire lifespan.
And just one more is, nobody ever talks about, I used to be in solar business, but nobody, which maybe is unfair, but nobody ever talks about the cost of taking solar off the roofs and who pays for it, and the issues of, yes, you have a roof, but sometimes things happen with the roof and you gotta get it fixed. So I guess the bigger issue is that is taking the solar off the roof and then.
Well, if you need to replace your roof, as I mentioned, you want to do that before putting the system up. But if you have to do that in the midstream, the customer would pay for the cost of removing it. Normally, if you own a system and say, in 20 years or 25 years, there's like a super duper system that you want to replace it with, again, that would be your responsibility. But if you're leasing the system or have a power purchase agreement, it's the owner that has that responsibility. So they have to do it. And typically they give you 3 options. They will either remove it at your request. They will offer to extend their contract with you. So say it's a 15 or 20 year, they might give you another 5-year or whatever the case may be. And then the third option is to sell it to you at fair market value. I saw your hand first, sir, and then next to you, we'll go next. Okay.
How likely is the federal tax incentive likely to stay?
That's a good question these days. It's hard to predict anything that's going to happen tomorrow, but I think it's likely to stay. But it is unpredictable, but they went through a lot of effort to increase it. As you recall, it was starting to decline. It was scheduled to go down to 22%, and then they bumped it back up to 30% till 2032. But who knows? Who knows what could happen? Yes.
One observation before I forget. Our roof was damaged and the solar panels had to be removed and then reinstalled. I watched this process. It took 2 man-days to take it off. It took 2 more man-days to put them back on. Fortunately, the damage to our roof was covered by insurance because the bill for that section was $4,000. Okay, so you can do a little math and see that you might get a side job removing and installing solar panels. My other question is, we received a quote to put in a battery system last year. At that time, we were told that we weren't in a fringe edge place. Has that, and so that incentive would not be available to us. Has that area expanded since about third quarter last year?
I believe it is, it's not permanent. They do assess it, over a period. It looked back to 2012. So the intent of the grid edge adder is to provide, support for the most vulnerable in our society. And among those are the people that are prone to losing power. So to the extent things have shifted and your neighborhood now is experiencing more blackouts or longer blackouts, you could be the grid edge. It's not like permanent, is what I'm trying to say. So you would have to check at the time you're working with your contractor to see whether your circuit is on the grid edge list.
Conversely, if you plan on that as part of the financing, does what you just said indicate that it might go away at some other points?
I believe the correct answer is if you have a contract and it's approved by the Green Bank, you're still eligible for that, even if it were to change before they finish installation. But again, I would check with the Connecticut Green Bank just to be certain of that.
My last question is,
I feel like a genie here with getting 3 questions.
is the quote factors in a payment over something like 10 years? Okay?
Yep.
From what I heard you just say, the batteries only last about 10 years. So is that
Minimum of 10. I mean, they're warranted for 10, but they should last, 15 or more.
okay? Is that money sitting in a bank somewhere, or does that come out of receipts of the utility system? How is that money accumulated to pay the people who are receiving those incentive payouts over a 10-year period?
I believe this is coming from a portion of the public benefits charge. So if you have a contract, they are committed to paying you for 10 years. Again, it's higher in the first 5 years, and then it drops down for the next 5 years. I should add that as time goes forward, just as with the old solar program, the incentives are scheduled to come down. So if like many people say, I prefer to wait, and I think things are going to be better, prices will come down in a few years. They might, but the incentives might also come down. So that's something to be aware of. The good news is for the residential side, there's no risk of, we're not moving into the next tier anytime soon. In contrast, the commercial side was hugely successful, oversubscribed. They had to pause it. So they'll be ready to, they're going to be dropping the incentives on the commercial side. But if you act in the near term, you'll still be getting the highest incentives. But if you wait several years, we might be into the next tier of lower incentives. Yes, sir.
I actually wanted to answer the battery question.
Oh, by
'Cause you
all
keep
means.
saying batteries actually go by cycles,
Okay.
and a lot of things can affect that. So the material the battery is made out of, it'll have different number of cycles. So things can prolong or take that away. So like, for instance, a basement might be a better, if that's possible, a better option because it's a more constant temperature. They have different batteries have certain temperatures that they like to be at. So you're warranting it for 10 years, but it could last longer. It could, obviously, if it's warranted for 10 years, it's not less than 10. But you really need to pay attention to the number of cycles that it's rated for and the composition of the battery. And like I said, worry about things like, the garage, the only thing that worries me there is a little bit, like I said, the constant temperature.
Yeah.
The good news is some of the lithium ion batteries are actually lasting about 40%, the ones that have been created recently, 40% more cycles than they anticipated. So that's actually, really good news. Anyways.
Thank you. That's good. I learn something every time I do these presentations, but you want to talk to the experts because they will be able to answer your specific questions. Yes, sir.
One of my worries is that the amount that is being paid back to the people who are putting these systems in their homes is not at the market value. So who's going to hold Eversource accountable for actually having us create the energy, giving it to the grid, and then having the rest of the public continue to benefit from that? Like what you're on your slide, the numbers that were being presented, they're actually buying the energy for us for a lot cheaper. That's what it appears to me.
Yeah, they're probably not the world's greatest altruists, but we do have the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and they have an annual review. So if it turns out that customers are not being adequately compensated, there's always the possibility that they could modify the incentives, as they did last year. They increased the incentives significantly from the original outset of the program.
I think the general consensus is that our regulatory board is having heat. In reality, I mean, there's a lot of families starting out there. Yeah, I would love to be. I'm all for green.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem like the pay for the public is there right now. Like that's the thing that disappoints me the most about it is that I don't think we're holding Eversource accountable for this.
Well, you can use the incentive calculator and get a more specific idea for a system that you're considering, and then figure out if you think it's worthwhile. Did you have a question next to him or not? Okay. You? Okay. People are scratching him. Okay, yeah?
Just one thing from personal experience over the last couple of years, the list of contractors that is officially stated are the contractors is the ones who've applied, who isn't necessarily the people who they then hire as subcontractors to do the work. So it is important to have the conversation with the general contractor, if you will, as to who's responsible for doing whatever, who are going to be the electricians, who are going to be the construction workers, et cetera, for your project, so that you know and can find out about those folks, what their experience is. In my case, the general contractor had far less experience than the subs who he used, who have been doing the work for multiple general contractors in the state for 10 years. So I was fortunate. But
That's a good point.
You have to look behind the veil.
Yeah. We attempted to get that information. We were trying to create a consumer handbook, and it was difficult getting that information. Even the Green Bank was having difficulty getting it from the contractors because they were non-responsive.
I mean, my whole business runs on the town group, so, everybody just ask the neighbors.
Yeah. Mark, did you have one last question?
Most people who get batteries already have solar, or they get solar with it?
I would say early on, it's probably people who have solar that are adding. But as we go forward, it's probably going to be somebody who's a newbie getting both.
Are there many people that just do batteries without solar?
I don't think so. I think you could probably count on one hand, but it is feasible. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out, and stay tuned. We hope to have a virtual presentation led by representatives of the Green Bank, who actually run the battery program, coming soon. We don't have a date yet for that, but hopefully next month. And we'll be working with the Sustainable Simsbury to try to come up with some other events, potentially a tour. So stay tuned. Thank you.